You knew not to sit on it. In millions of homes, there was one sofa, wrapped in clear plastic, that you were allowed to look at, but never live on. Maybe it was your grandmother's, maybe your aunt's, maybe your own. And if you ask most people why, you get the same answer. Fussy, old-fashioned, just protecting the furniture. But that is not the real reason. The real reason is bigger and stranger and far more human than she just liked things nice. And it quietly connects millions of families who never met, across every background you can imagine. There is one piece of this that almost no one ever puts together, and it changes how you see that sofa completely. We'll get there. To understand why, we have to go back much further than you would expect. Not to the 1960s, when plastic-covered couches hit their peak. Not even to the early 1900s, when the room they sat in got a new name. We have to go back centuries, to the very idea of a room in the house that was not really for the people who lived there. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the finest furnishings in a home were treated as things to display, far more than things to use. Wealthy families draped their expensive chairs and settees in cheaper cloth, guarding them from dust, sunlight, and the wear of daily life. Some households lived year-round with their furniture completely covered, uncovering it only when important guests arrived. The furniture was not yours to enjoy, it was yours to preserve. And the room that held these untouchable objects was the parlor. The word comes from the French, to speak. In theory, a place for receiving visitors. In practice, proof that you had arrived. By the 18th and 19th centuries, having a parlor announced to the world that you were refined, cultured, and prosperous enough to give up an entire room to appearances. You did not just live in the parlor, you performed in it. And the furniture inside was not built for comfort. You were not meant to sink into it. You were meant to perch. But the parlor had a darker side. For much of the 1800s, it had another job. When someone in the family died, their body was washed, dressed, and laid out in the parlor, for neighbors and relatives to pay their respects before burial. Weddings happened there too, but so did death. As the story is often told, the room even earned a grim nickname for it. So picture that space, a cold, formal room built to impress the people you most wanted to impress, and also the place where your grandmother's body lay in state. Heavy curtains drawn, not exactly where the children played board games on a Saturday afternoon. And then, slowly, something changed. Death began to leave the house. By the early 1900s, more Americans were being cared for in hospitals, and more funerals were moving into funeral homes, or, as they were first called, funeral parlors. That word quietly packed up and moved out of the house into the mortuary business, and the room it left behind had an identity crisis. Enter Edward Bok. Edward Bok was a Dutch-born American editor who ran the Ladies' Home Journal for 30 years. He won a Pulitzer Prize. Theodore Roosevelt once called him the only man he had ever heard of who changed, for the better, the architecture of an entire nation. And Bok had strong opinions about that gloomy, pretentious room at the front of every American house. He thought it was foolish, even wrong, to build an expensive room you were afraid to use. So his magazine helped give it a new name. The parlor became the living room, a room for living, not for dying, not for impressing, not for preserving, for living. And the name stuck. Bok did not stop at the name. His magazine published affordable house plans that ordinary families could actually build. These journal houses did away with the formal parlor entirely, made kitchens more compact, and stripped off the cupolas and scrollwork of the overstuffed Victorian home. It was a quiet revolution in how Americans thought about their space. And then came the sofa. With affordable new couch designs in the 1910s, upholstered seating became something a normal family could finally own. Comfortable seating. Seating that invited you to stay a while. But here, human nature pulled one of its most predictable tricks. The parlor was dead. Long live the parlor, because millions of families, especially working families and immigrant families who had clawed their way into owning a home, looked at their beautiful new sofa and thought, this is too nice to actually use. And so, the plastic went on. In the 1940s and 50s, slipcovers came roaring back in a brand new material. Clear vinyl, plastic. At the time it felt modern, novel, almost high-tech. the space-age answer to an age-old anxiety. How do you protect the nicest thing you own from the people who live with it? By the 1960s and 70s, plastic seat covers had become a common denominator of American family life. In one home, a golden velvet sofa and plush orange chairs sat under plastic for more than 25 years. Every cushion, every armrest, every pillow, covered one by one, with thick seams, white binding, and heavy zippers hidden in the back. This was not casual protection. This was engineered preservation. The plastic was ordered the same day as the furniture. Someone came to the home to measure and custom fit every piece. Sometimes the covers went on before the sofa was ever delivered. It arrived in your house already sealed, already off limits. And everyone who grew up with one of these sofas remembers the same handful of things. The squeak the moment you sat down, that gave you away instantly. The way it stuck to your bare legs in July before air conditioning was common. The lampshades that stayed wrapped in cellophane for years. And the way children, on the rare day they were allowed in that room, had to sit on the floor. The message was quiet, but clear. This room, this sofa, is not for you. It is to be admired. From a distance. Now, some people wave this off as just an ethnic thing, a habit of Black and Italian families. But that is too simple. This was a generational practice tied to one specific experience, moving from having almost nothing to owning something worth protecting. Italian families, Jewish families, Puerto Rican, Irish, and Chinese families. Black families who had come north in the Great Migration. That is not a small list. That is basically the whole story of 20th century America, sitting together on one squeaky couch. And for Black families in particular, living through the Great Migration and the Civil Rights era, that plastic was not paranoia. It was strategy. In a society structured against your advancement, every hard-won thing had to be protected with exceptional care. A sofa was not just a sofa, it was proof of progress. It was wealth you could sit on. Or rather, wealth you could look at. Because sitting on it might wear it down, and replacing it was never guaranteed. There is a place in New York, the Tenement Museum, that recreates the home of a Puerto Rican garment worker named Ramonita, the matriarch of her building who welcomed wave after wave of new families through her door. And of everything in that apartment, do you know what stops visitors cold? The plastic-covered sofa. They stand in front of it and the memories come pouring out. My great-aunt had a sofa exactly like this. My grandmother covered her furniture too. This brings it all back. But underneath the nostalgia, there is something sad. Someone once cleaned out their late mother's house and found a cabinet full of dishes no one had eaten from in 40 years. Still perfect, still waiting for the special occasion. That never came. And before you laugh at that, be honest with yourself for a second. How many things in your own life are you saving for someday? The good dishes you only use at Thanksgiving. The bottle of wine you are waiting for the right occasion to open. The outfit you are keeping for when you lose the weight. The room you set up perfectly and never actually sit in. We all do some version of it. It is not a character flaw. It is a deeply human response to scarcity, real or imagined. When you have had to fight for something, protecting it feels like the responsible thing to do. As one writer put it, every preserved item was a quiet declaration that we were not good enough for our own belongings. That real life was happening somewhere else, to someone else. We confused care with denial. We thought that if we kept things nice enough, long enough, we would finally become the kind of people who deserved them. That might be the most important sentence in this whole story. So what finally killed the good sofa? A few things arrived at once. First, the television. Once there is a set in the corner and the whole family is gathered around it on a Tuesday night, you cannot really keep pretending the room is a sacred, untouched space. Then the walls came down, open floor plans blurred the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen into one connected space, where life just happened. And then the deeper shift. The children of the plastic sofa generation grew up. The kids who got scolded for sitting on the good couch. And they made a quiet, collective decision. They were going to actually live in their living rooms. Today, home designers will tell you the formal front room and the formal dining room are quietly disappearing. Buyers, especially younger ones, are not chasing the biggest house or the glossiest finishes anymore. They want spaces that fit how they really live. A big house full of rooms you cannot use is not a status symbol to them. It is a stress symbol. But here is what is worth pausing on. The plastic-covered sofa was never stupid. It was not superstition or vanity. It was a completely rational response to a hard set of conditions. When you have scraped together enough to buy something beautiful and you are not sure you will ever afford to replace it, protecting it makes perfect sense. The mistake was never the protection. The mistake was the postponement. The sofa was supposed to be for the family. Instead, the family ended up serving the sofa. That grandmother was not confused or neurotic. She had worked long days, saved for months, and felt something when that sofa arrived that is hard to put into words. Pride, relief, the quiet satisfaction of owning something beautiful in a life that had not always held much beauty. Of course she covered it. Of course she protected it. The plastic was love, inconvenient, squeaky, slightly suffocating love. But love. That is the whole story, really. The parlor began as a room for show, and for the dead. It became the living room when someone finally decided this space should be for the living. Then, for decades, families who had earned every single thing they owned turned it right back into a room for show, out of love and pride and a very human need to hold on to something good. And then their children, who grew up pressing their faces against the doorframe of that good room, finally just walked in and sat down. The plastic is gone, the sofa is lived on, and somewhere a grandmother is watching that happen and feeling two things at once. A little grief for those pristine cushions, and a whole lot of relief that her family is finally comfortable enough to stop protecting everything and just live. So let me ask you, what was the good room in your house? The dishes you never used, the cabinet you could not open, the sofa you could not sit on? Tell me in the comments. Those stories are the whole reason this channel exists. This is the Unspoken House, where we find the hidden history inside the ordinary things we used to love. Stay with us. There is a whole house full of stories like this one, and we have only just opened the first door.